Hello there and welcome to the most watched business show in the country. This is the Business Weekly Show here on Citi TV and I am your host, Michael Obudu. In the next 1 hour, we'll be bringing you a wrap of all the major business news stories for the week, including the mid-year budget review. So if you're ready, let's go. After much anticipation, the mid-year budget review was finally presented on the 25th of July. A number of policies and targets were reviewed. Well, if you missed the presentation entirely, here are highlights of the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Attah's delivery.
In his first public remark after Ghana invited the International Monetary Fund for support, the Minister of Finance Ken Ofori-Attah, during the mid-year budget review presentation in the House, explained that although the government had tried resisting the urge of signing up for an IMF bailout, Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the COVID-19 pandemic led to some economic challenges that required external intervention.
Unfortunately, unprecedented global developments, Mr. Speaker, over the past 2 years, especially in these last 6 months, have really and truly disrupted our efforts. Governments across the world have had to change course to tackle the current crisis. Governments that less than a year ago were busily talking about energy transition and green and cleaner fuels have gone back to firing their coal plants. Governments that are known for low taxes are now raising taxes to tackle growing deficits. These are not ordinary times, not for Ghana, not for Africa, and certainly not for the whole world. Right, Honorable Speaker, let us all acknowledge that the situation we are experiencing now is different. The global context we find ourselves in is the first of its magnitude in the Fourth Republic, and even before that. It is therefore disappointing when people want to pretend that these developments are purely domestic.
The minister presented the government's intention to revise economic growth targets in view of the challenging times domestically and globally. This includes the revision of the projected economic growth rate target from 5.8% to 3.7%.
Provisional Q1 2022 National Account statistics published by Ghana Statistical Service in June 2022 show that the overall real GDP growth for the first quarter of 2022 was 3.3% compared to 3.6% recorded in the same period in 2021. Non-oil GDP for the first quarter of 2022 grew by 3.7% compared to the Q1 2020 growth of 5.3%. Revision to 2022 macroeconomic framework. Mr. Speaker, as I've already indicated, the macroeconomic environment has significantly changed, prompting the revision of the macroeconomic framework. Furthermore, based on the development for the first 6 months of 2022 and outlook for the rest of the year, we have accordingly revised the macro fiscal targets for 2022 as follows. Overall GDP growth of 3.7% down from 5.8%. Non-oil GDP growth of 4.3% down from 5.9%. End period inflation of 28.5% up from 8%. The overall deficit of 6.6% of GDP down from 7.4%. Primary surplus of 0.4% of GDP up from a surplus of 0.1% of GDP. And the gross international reserves of not less than 3 months import cover.
Furthermore, Ken Ofori-Attah announced the revenue measures that will shore up government's efforts to revive the economy. This includes some proposed amendments and revisions on the collection of value-added tax revenue.
The following revenue measures will be pursued in the remaining half of the year. EVAT. The digitalization of our revenue mobilization processes remain a key focus. Therefore, the GRA is finalizing all relevant processes to facilitate the effective collection of VAT revenue. This includes a proposed amendment of the Value Added Tax Act 870 to enable its electronic collection effective 1st October 2022. property rates, it's fundamentally important that together with the Ministry of Local Government, we continue to assist and support the assemblies, not only to expand their revenue base, but to do so with optimal efficiency and effectiveness. Therefore, the collective efforts of the local government, the assemblies, and the GRA in launching an end-to-end digitized process will be realized in August. Extension of waiver of interest and penalty to December 2022, and introduction of upfront payment of VAT on importers not registered for VAT with implementation start date of 1st October 2022.
What did you make of the presentation? Were your expectations met? Various stakeholders in the business community and the minority in Parliament have been reacting to portions of the mid-year budget review. The opinions were varied actually. While some were happy some policies were maintained, others expected them to be removed. For the minority, they weren't too impressed with the budget review. Many were keen on the mid-year budget review presentation as it would give a clear economic direction of the country for the remaining half of the year, especially as the country seeks a bailout program from the International Monetary Fund (IMF). The Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, after over an hour's delivery, stated the government's strategy for managing the economy for the rest of the year on Monday. But the minority in Parliament finds the mid-year budget review presentation very uninspiring, while stressing that it did not address the pertinent issues of the country. Ranking member of the Finance Committee in Parliament, Kaisala Toforsen, cast doubt on the government's ability to achieve many of its revised targets for the economy.
Our minister responsible for finance informed all of us that the GDP growth for the year 2022 has been revised from 5.8% to 3.7%. I beg to say, even the 3.7%, he cannot achieve it. Fitch has just informed us that the GDP growth for the year 2022 will be 2.5%, the worst ever in the history of Ghana. Colleagues, things fall apart. Things fall apart. Unfortunately, we do not have the competent hands to take Ghana out of this mess. That's true. We do not have competent hands to take this country out of the mess that we've seen ourselves. Ajegong, things are out of hand. I'm disappointed in the statement today as a Ghanaian that I am thinking that if a country is in crisis to the extent that your debt is unsustainable, when you come and appear before the people's representative, Parliament of the Republic, first you have to speak the truth. Second, you have to speak in a way that you get public buy-in.
Second Vice President of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Stefan Mason, felt the government did not provide enough information on its proposed homegrown solutions to improve the country's fortunes.
I haven't made that presentation. I guess some mixed feelings. These are the reasons why. You know, previously, the government, or through the Minister of Finance, had laid certain policies that were going to ensure revenue increase.
The homegrown policies.
Yes. So I was very much looking forward to hearing a lot about that. Because why have we gone to IMF? This whole IMF issue are not policies IMF gives us. They are policies that we present to them that we are going to implement. So I was looking at saying that, okay, these programs that we intended to do, now we are going to do it. So the Exemptions Bill, nothing was said about that. And there are a lot of exemptions that goes on that makes us lose a lot of revenue. Okay? The property rate issue. I was also expecting something to be said about that as well. Then revenue leakages. I mean, in a auditor's report, we're losing so much money that nothing is being said about it to ensure that we plug those holes.
President of the Ghana Union of Traders Associations, GUTA, Dr. Joseph Obing, is rather pleased that the benchmark values policy was not tampered with, although he had concerns over the VAT policy.
I'm happy that they do not touch the benchmark value because the times are not ripe for any further layer of cost. If we have to increase duties and to put up another burden for the good people of Ghana. Already inflation has taken a toll. So I was actually not expecting, even though my brother was expecting that it should have been handed to him. But I was also expecting that the VAT, we should have gone back to the flat rate. But it seems that we are still going on the standard rate. But it creates a lot of unfairness in the market.
Greater Accra chairman of the Association of Ghana Industries, AGI, Chona Makpelo, commended the government for its effort at reviewing energy contracts, which he hoped would translate into cheaper energy for industry, but he expected some taxes to be reviewed.
The finance minister talks about the review of power purchasing agreement, and I thought that's a step in the right direction. For us in industry, we're waiting to see how that review will impact on electricity tariffs for members of industry. At this stage, it's important to recognize the silence of the finance minister on most of the tax reviews we proposed. Yeah. In fact, his silence was legendary, because there are many things that we're expecting to hear. For example, the issue of the benchmark value. We are expecting total scrapping of the benchmark value. There's another issue of 1% COVID tax, levy. That 1% adds up to the cost of production. As it is now, we don't even know, it appears that tax will happen in perpetuity. We don't know the end date. There's no sunset clause in that law.
Right after the mid-year budget review, allegation from the minority followed that government had instructed the Bank of Ghana to print over 22 billion Ghana cedis without parliamentary approval. This, they stressed, amounted to an illegality. The Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. John Kumah, however, refuted the allegation. Here's his explanation. The minority spokesperson on finance, Kesel Atoforcing, had on Monday accused government and the governor of the central bank of printing new currency of over 22 billion Ghana cedis without approval from parliament. This, according to him, constitutes an illegality, which is partly to blame for the rising inflation levels in the country. Ghana's inflation is currently at concerning levels of almost 30%. Speaking to journalists after Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta presented the government's mid-year budget to Parliament, Kesel Atoforcing stated that the new currency had contributed to the country's high inflation levels.
I am surprised that in the minister's statement, he failed to alert all of us that he has encouraged the Bank of Ghana to print new money worth 22 billion Ghana cedis, only for us to see it in this document. And you can see it in the media review document, page 97, appendix 2A. And the Bank of Ghana, they have printed 22 billion and 48 million Ghana cedis. 22 billion and 48 million Ghana cedis, new money that they have printed, without approval of Parliament, without informing all of us. This is illegal. It is against the Bank of Ghana Act. And I want to urge the governor of the central bank that he has engaged in an illegality. Gross illegality. And in future, if he is asked to print money, he should first come to Parliament first.
Reacting to the comments, Deputy Finance Minister Dr. John Kumah debunked the claims, adding that the Bank of Ghana and the government did no wrong.
Section 30 of the Bank of Ghana Act allows central government and BOG to operate on overdraft basis. It is within the laws of the country. And so on the Bank of Ghana's own balance sheet, they can give overdraft to government as a loan, which can be repaid within a specified period. And this is not the first time any government has done that. When he was deputy minister, Bank of Ghana supported the Ministry of Finance and Government of Ghana on the same arrangement within the Bank of Ghana Act. So what has changed? That today we are told the new economics from NDC is that when Bank of Ghana gives overdraft to government of Ghana, it is called printing of money. I am surprised. This is not economics, and they have to come again. It just shows their incompetence and their lack of appreciation of the situation. And so I just want to put it out there. First of all, we have not hidden any information. Bank of Ghana has not printed any money, and we want to clarify this issue. It is within the law.
In the mid-year budget presentation, the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta had mentioned the introduction of road tolls on newly constructed road projects which are not funded by government. Many had misinterpreted this as a reintroduction of road tolls across the country after the government had earlier scrapped the policy. The Ministry of Roads and Highways has been clarifying issues. The Ministry of Roads and Highways in a statement stressed that the presentation by the Finance Minister was restricted to financing arrangements for the Accra-Tema Motorway and Extension project. It further clarified that the Finance Minister's reference to tolls and the budget review was in respect of public-private partnership road projects only. Government had announced last year that motorists who ply tolled roads across the country will no longer be required to pay tolls immediately after the approval of the 2022 budget. Meanwhile, transport operators in Accra say they expect the government to ensure revenue leakages with the collection of tolls are addressed, as this has been the case in the past. Charles Danso is the chairman of the Committed Drivers Union.
You know, last time the Roads and Highway Minister came and then spoke to all drivers and Ghanaians that about 70% of the road tolls. In fact, if I've forgotten the percentage, forgive me. He said a certain percentage of the road tolls that they collect from us go waste. In fact, we can't pay money and then go waste. So if indeed they want to bring it back, we have to see that there will be a certain form of collection that will tack or compare everybody to pay the road tolls, not commercial drivers to pay and then V8 will pass by and then not paying. In fact, if it happened like that, we will not agree. So they have to put strong measures so that the money will go direct to government. And then again, we heard we heard that the money that we are paying, the money that we pay, they gave it to a contractor. This cook money too goes to a contractor. No, they have to let internal revenue collect this money so that government can account for.
Government has once again revised its revenue target for the electronic transfer levy, the e-levy, for this year to 611 million Ghana cedis from an earlier 4.9 billion Ghana cedis. The government has not met its revenue target for the policy since its introduction. Some people say the mid-year budget review presented a good opportunity to revise the levy downwards. Perhaps that will motivate more people to pay the tax.
The implementation of the electronic transfer levy, which commenced in May 2022, was originally expected to help bring in about 6.9 billion Ghana cedis this year to shore up government's revenue. The levy, which was initially pegged at 1.75% on mobile money and other electronic transactions, was later reduced to 1.5% following protests from various stakeholders. But following several delays in the passage of the e-levy bill by Parliament, it was predicted that the levy will not achieve its intended target. It's just been 3 months into the implementation of the levy and it has underperformed woefully. A leading member of the New Patriotic Party, Gabi Asare-Otre-Darko, noted that the tax measure since its implementation has generated only 10% of estimated revenue. Figures from the 2022 mid-year budget review have also disclosed that the new tax, which many Ghanaians opposed vehemently, has only raked in 93.7 million cedis from the 1.46 billion Ghana cedi target for the first half of this year. It is for this reason that the government has revised again the e-levy's revenue target for the year 2022 to 611 million Ghana cedis. This cut of almost 90% was also stated in the mid-year budget review document. This development has since intensified calls by stakeholders and Ghanaians as a whole to scrap the electronic transfer levy. Economist with GCB Capital Limited, Courage Boti, has been reacting to the development.
The revision of the target for e-levy and by extension most of the other new revenue lines are not at all a surprise. I think what is surprising is the significant reduction, really. But yet still, I do not think it was right to take it off at this point in time. Every policy takes low to take off. And of course, the negative reactions leading to the low collections on the e-levy is anticipated, even if the magnitude is more than expected, plus the implementational challenges from the start, where individual with different accounts can send 100 cedis through each of those accounts without being charged levy. Now that has been fixed and system unitized, and so it will pay to monitor the data over a longer period to see the trends and patterns. Then that will inform whether maybe to continue or not to continue. Remember the case of the luxury vehicles. It came, data studied over a longer period. You saw the pattern, then you make a decision on that. For a period where we are struggling already with revenue and are trying to make up, you want to keep every line that you can have at this point in time until you have enough data point to make a decision as to whether to continue or not. So it's not surprising at all, and I think it's actually the right call to continue with it until end of year. Then the data can speak for itself as to whether it's a task line worth keeping or not.
Away from the mid-year budget review, Parliament has finally passed the Tax Exemptions Bill. This is great news, especially in these trying times where the government is making efforts to raise more revenue locally. It's quite concerning how much Ghana loses to tax exemptions, which could have been used to finance many infrastructural projects.
When assented to by the President, the Tax Exemptions Bill will strengthen the monitoring role of the Ministry of Finance and Parliament on the management of exemptions. Also, it will seek to provide a regulatory regime for monitoring tax exemptions to ensure that exemptions granted are used for the intended purposes as well as curtail the abuse of the existing exemption regime. It is projected that with the passage of the bill, exemptions for the 2022 financial year will be lowered by about 500 million cedis. Many stakeholders, including the Association of Ghana Industries and the Ghana Union of Traders Associations, have for years pushed for government to put in place measures to ensure the state is not deprived of billions of cedis, especially through tax exemptions. Fiscal policy specialist with Oxfam Ghana, Dr. Alex Ampabing, welcomed the passage of the bill.
I think this is a very welcoming news for us to know that the tax exemptions bill has been passed because this is something not only civil society organizations in Ghana, but also tax experts and even the citizenry in general have all been advocating for the passage of this exemptions bill for so many years. And the reason is simple, because you don't really have a way to streamline granting of tax exemptions in Ghana. There are exemptions which can be granted as part of strategic exemptions coming from the executive arm. We can also have some negotiated also on behalf of government by the Ghana Investment Promotion Center. So there are so many ways businesses coming to Ghana could go about getting exemptions granted.
Dr. Ampabing further urged the government to be accountable for the taxes exempted in the year.
What I hope it happens is that it shouldn't just be one of those paperworks, but it should be a document that should be followed through. Especially as we report on our debt, I hope that the finance minister will be reporting periodically on the exemptions that we have given out. So we're able to tell what we got back in return. And we also use the period to assess which exemptions have to be continued, which exemptions have to be modified, and which exemptions that we need to abolish altogether. Because part of having the exemptions bill passed is to be able to regulate the sector, be able to assess what we are giving out and what we are getting in return. So at least it gave us a kind of a road map in assessing what we are giving away. So I hope next year, by now, we should be in a better position to assess what we have been giving away and what have we gained in return.
Latest data released from the Bank of Ghana puts Ghana's total public debt stock as of June 2022 at $54.4 billion, which is equivalent to 393.4 billion Ghana cedis. The debt dropped from about $4 billion in the first 6 months of the year, from almost $60 billion in December 2022 to about $54 billion at half year 2022. Economist Khalid Mate says government must be strict on its spending controls to check the country's debt levels.
Per the data from the Central Bank's Summary of Economic and Financial Data Report, an additional 41.6 billion Ghana cedis has pushed Ghana's public debt stock to 393.4 billion Ghana cedis as of June 2022. The June 2022 debt figure brings Ghana's debt to gross domestic product (GDP) ratio to 78.3%, using a projected GDP for 2022 of about 502 billion Ghana cedis. Despite Ghana's total public debt stock increasing from 351.8 billion Ghana cedis in December 2021 to 393.4 billion Ghana cedis in June 2022, the debt figure in dollar terms dropped from $58.6 billion in December 2021 to $54.4 billion at half year 2022. The new debt figure of 393.4 billion Ghana cedis represents an increase of 41.6 billion Ghana cedis from the 351.8 billion Ghana cedis total public debt recorded in December 2021. A further breakdown of the debt numbers shows that the component of debt secured locally rose by about 8 billion Ghana cedis from 181.8 billion Ghana cedis in December 2021 to 190.1 billion Ghana cedis in June 2022. This represents about 38% of the projected GDP for 2022. The external component of the debt also increased by about 33 billion Ghana cedis in the first 6 months of 2022 from 170 billion Ghana cedis in December 2021 to 203.4 billion Ghana cedis in June 2022. The overall increase in the debt numbers in cedi terms came largely from the over 16% depreciation of the cedi against the dollar from December 2021 to June 2022. This confirms concerns by analysts and economists that the country's debt has reached alarming levels and urgently needs to be looked at. Khalid Mate is an economist with Data Bank, and he urges government to be strict on its spending controls.
The situation where, we have said this time and again that government needs to take a second look at its fiscal operations. But here we want to be a little heavy on expenditure control, because then again, if you look at the fiscal numbers, revenue underperformed, and this has been the historical situation. And in a situation where revenue is underperforming, you want to have governments continuing to keep a firm lead on spendings, but the situation does not appear to give that comfort. Because if you look at the revenue and expenditure numbers, whilst the revenue so far this year appears to have underperformed relative to last year, you see the expenditure actually going higher as a percentage of this year's GDP compared to last year. So it seems that government is struggling to control expenditure. And because of that, government is heavily exposed to exchange rate shocks and high interest rate. So the call will be for government to be unrelenting and very strict on its spending controls. And we have the anchor for that.
In its quest to ensure macroeconomic stability, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Ghana has maintained the policy rate at 19%. This is the first time the central bank has maintained the policy rate this year after increasing it twice by 200 basis points or more.
The announcement of the stay of the monetary policy rate at 19% in July 2022 came at the end of the 107th Monetary Policy Committee meeting. The monetary policy rate is the rate at which commercial banks borrow from the central bank. This has a direct impact on the cost of lending to individuals and businesses, since commercial banks use the figure to set their interest rates. Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Ernest Addison, attributed the committee's decision to maintain the policy rate to witness deceleration in in the inflation rate in the past few months and the expectation of a strong macroeconomic framework that will underpin an agreed IMF program. Latest data from the Ghana Statistical Service shows that prices associated with transport, housing, gas and electricity pushed the rate of inflation for June to hit 29.8%, a 2.2 percentage points increase compared to the 27.6% recorded in May. The 2.2 percentage points gap signifies a slowdown in the inflation curve compared to previous months. Here is the Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Ernest Addison. Dr. Ernest Addison also explained that the decision to maintain the policy rate at 19% was to allow the bank to observe the effects of previous hikes on the country's macroeconomic indicators amid the continued surge in inflation.
Let's stay a while longer in the banking sector because it appears things seem to be going pretty well for it. Data from the Bank of Ghana has disclosed that the banking sector made in excess of 4.4 billion Ghana cedis for the first 6 months of 2022. According to the Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee's latest press release, the industry recorded a before-tax profit of 4.4 billion Ghana cedis, a 21.6% growth compared to 32.1% recorded in the same period last year.
According to the Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee's latest press release, the banking sector's net interest income grew at 12.4% compared with 19.4% a year ago. Net fees and commissions, however, grew by 29.2% compared to 19.6% recorded in the previous year, reflecting a rebound in trade finance-related business. These developments, the central bank said, culminated in a 23% growth in operating income compared with a growth of 15.7% in the corresponding year. Furthermore, operating expenses of the banking sector also recorded a higher growth of 22.9% compared to 7.3% in the previous year, moderating the growth in profit before tax during the first half of 2022. The release continues to highlight that the assessment of the banking sector's performance for the first half of 2022 showed robust growth in assets and deposits. Total assets grew by 22.8% on a year-on-year basis to 200 billion Ghana cedis at the end of June 2022, compared to the growth of 17.2% in the same period last year. Total deposits, on the other hand, grew at a slower pace by 19.1% to 131.3 billion Ghana cedis relative to 22.5% growth a year earlier.
Ghana is benefiting from increased revenue from her exports, as latest data from the Bank of Ghana's summary and macroeconomic and financial data for July 2022 shows that the value of Ghana's total exports increased to about $9 billion in June 2022. This is an increase from the $7.6 billion recorded during the same period in 2021.
The latest figures by the Bank of Ghana indicates that the country received $9 billion from her exports in June 2022 compared to the estimated $7.5 billion it spent on importing goods for the same period. While the total exports represent a growth of 18.4%, total imports also saw an increase of 11.9% within the one-year period. The Central Bank's summary of macroeconomic and financial data indicates that Ghana recorded a trade surplus of $1.43 billion in the first half of the year, higher than the $886 million recorded during the same period last year. The country, as of June 2022, made $7.2 billion in export revenue from cocoa, oil and gold altogether. This represents $1 billion more compared to the $6.2 billion the country earned for the same period in 2021. A look at the data shows that of all the commodities within the total exports bracket, gold dominated, recording $3 billion in June 2022, followed by crude oil, which recorded $2.83 billion. Of the amount, revenue from oil exports went up by over 64% between June 2021 and the same period in 2022, as the country raked in $2.83 billion, up from the $1.75 billion recorded in the same period last year. The performance of oil exports so far in 2022 is as a result of the higher price of the commodity on the international market, according to some stakeholders. Benjamin Nsia is the head of research with the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers Ghana.
We've had an increase in revenue because of the hikes in the price of crude oil on the international market. If you look at the data carefully, as at March, price of crude reached $122 per barrel. That is Brent crude. Even surging up to $139 per barrel. So even though this year, the half of this year, production has declined by about 7%, because of the hikes on the hikes of petroleum products on the international market, Ghana is getting much revenue compared to last year, half of last year, 2021.
Export revenue from gold went up from $2.66 billion to $3 billion within the one-year period. The performance of gold for many stakeholders is largely due to a combination of the improvement in price and expansion in the output by both the small and large-scale producers, plus government's decision to reduce the withholding tax on gold exports from 3% to 1.5%. Exports from cocoa saw a decline in the first half of this year compared with the same period last year. The revenue from cocoa exports dropped by over 17% between June 2021 and the same period in 2022, as the country raked in $1.38 billion, down from the $1.78 billion recorded in the same period last year. Some stakeholders attribute the decline in the cocoa exports to the fall in the global consumption rate, among other factors. This has caused a fall in the exports of the raw material. Anthony Morrison is the CEO of the Chamber of Agribusiness Ghana.
Low consumption rate subsequent to our own internal issues of galamsey, destruction of cocoa farms for rubber plantation and galamsey, the disease issues, and also our own non-investment strategy towards sustainable cocoa production in the country are some of the key areas we want to look at this from.
Total imports, however, stood at $7.56 billion. This was dominated by oil imports of $5.28 billion. The revenue from oil imports went up by over 341.6% between June 2021 and the same period in 2022, as the country raked in $5.28 billion, up from the $1.2 billion recorded in the same period last year. But non-oil imports such as food and other consumables saw a drop by 58.19% between the period under review, as the country raked in $2.2 billion, down from the $5.5 billion recorded in the same period last year.
Let me ask you, have you been able to register all your SIM cards with your Ghana card? Or better still, I should rather ask if you have the Ghana card at all in the first place. The Mobile Money Agents Association of Ghana is appealing to the government to extend the 31st July deadline for the SIM card re-registration exercise. The group argues that with many people still having challenges with acquiring their Ghana cards, which is a requirement for the exercise, a significant number of phone users are yet to undergo the re-registration process.
Should government really go ahead with this particular directive, then it means that a lot of businesses are going to be impacted. The telcos will be impacted. Mobile money agents who leverage on this huge market will be affected or impacted negatively. We will call that government should actually put in another extension, probably if from now to maybe early next year. I think it will be a reasonable time period for government to actually crack the whip with regards to persons who might be feeling reluctant or adamant to have their SIM cards regularized.
Did you know that Ghana is the leading producer of yam in the world? Data from the Ghana Export Promotion Authority, GEPA, revealed that the country's exports of yam tubers reached a record high of $48 million for 2021. We sure are serving the world a piece of our sweet puna, that very famous and sumptuous local yam breed. The Ghana Exim Bank is set to commit $10 million to the production of yams to sustain Ghana's position. Ghana now controls 24% of the $200 million global export market, growing its export value from $38.5 million in 2018 to $48.2 million in 2021. Jamaica is Ghana's closest competitor, ranking second in the export of yam. Its total exports were valued at $39 million in 2021. Speaking to the media on the sidelines of a stakeholder forum on yam exports, Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana Exim Bank, Lawrence Ajinsam, stated that the total amount his outfit is committing to the industry will help players along the value chain boost their outputs.
The yam producers have been able to achieve a feat in this country by becoming number one in the world as per the 2021 export figures. They need to maintain that leadership of becoming number one in the world. And to do that, Exim Bank is prepared to be by their side in supporting them with an amount of $10 million going forward to help them in their pre-shipment, post-shipment, working capital, and thereby make Ghana be able to sustain that leadership going forward into 2022-2023, so that we ward off competition that may come from Jamaica or Nigeria. Already we are financing some of the exporters. So it is just today that I needed to tell them that we will be able to continue to support them. So they should come and approach us in line with our national export strategy.
Participants of the stakeholder forum are confident that the proposed investment will help establish Ghana's global position in yam exports.
It is welcome news because we need the money for building proper pack houses and also to help us with operating capital. We cannot go to the bank and take 30%. So if they will give the money to us at very low interest rate, then it will help move the industry forward. To help us sustain the industry, we need to go to the production level and ensure that yams are produced to international standards. And for the yams to be produced to international standards, we need global gap certification, we need traceability. Because these are the items that will be needed, that if we don't have these, you will not be able to export within the next 2 or 3 years, because Ghana has signed on into the EPA. So Europe is now being very stringent on exports, and America is following suit.
The sharecrop is very crucial to the sustenance of a lot of people in the northern regions of the country, but this is being threatened by the felling of these trees for charcoal. For them to be able to continue to incrementally benefit from the crop, there ought to be a way to produce the share fruit under a shorter period to make up for the lost trees. Players in the share value chain industry are therefore urging scientists to conduct further research aimed at reducing the gestation period of the share tree. They believe reducing the gestation period for the tree is crucial to the sustainability of the industry.
The share industry employs a significant number of women in the share value chain in northern Ghana. Share nut picking and processing serves as an alternative source of income for majority of women in the area. Despite its increasing economic importance, the share tree has come under severe threat from persons who cut the tree and use it to produce charcoal. Additionally, some of the trees have grown old and need to be replaced. As a result of this development, share nut pickers like Fati Idrisu are compelled to travel further to get the nuts.
It's yearly business. So sometimes, like this year, it has not yielded like that. I heard some parts is there, but my area, it is not too much. So we go a long distance to get them.
As part of efforts to make the share business attractive and lucrative to young women, Global Share Alliance and the MasterCard Foundation launched a share business empowerment program in northern Ghana aimed at introducing innovation in share picking, processing, and marketing. The country head for the MasterCard Foundation, Rosie Finn, said the initiative will help provide sustainable livelihood for young women.
And a lot of the reason why the young women are not attracted to it is because, one, it was not lucrative, right? They would have all of these share nuts, which they will process, but they didn't have the power to be able to charge market prices. They were often charging below market prices, which made it very unattractive for them. This is when we started to see a lot of migration towards the southern part of the country. And now we're telling, these women that you can stay in the north, and because of the cooperatives that we are putting together, giving them the power to sell their share at market prices, you'll be able to have a sustained living experience in the northern region. And there's no longer the need as a young woman to go to Accra or wherever in the south for a living.
Players in the industry are worried about the sustainability of the share industry despite the increasing opportunities in the sector. The managing director for Global Share Alliance, Aaron Edu, believes scientists need to research into improved planting materials to reduce the gestation period of the cash tree.
There are no investment incentives for people to invest into new trees, and a long gestation period makes it such that it's unattractive for people to do plantation of share, as anyone would do it for palm or for cocoa or for other things. What needs to be done, and what a lot of stakeholders, including the GNSA, Cocoa Research Institute, and now the Tree Crop Authority is coming in.
The $5.7 million share empowerment program is expected to create about 90,000 jobs for women in the value chain. According to the U.S. Ambassador to Ghana, Virginia Palmer, this will go further to reduce household poverty levels in northern Ghana.
The MasterCard Foundation is bringing a digital tool that improves the traceability of shea and soya, and the U.S. government increases the volume of shea and soya production, and together we're creating a more resilient, women-based supply chain, a stronger and more inclusive company, a more robust, sustainable trade between our two countries, and this type of trade creates opportunities for people here in Ghana's north.
Now to our final story for the week, which is on fuel prices in Ghana. This time on a rather bright note. The National Petroleum Authority is predicting that the price of fuel is likely to drop further in the month of August. With how worrying the price of fuel is in the country, any reduction is welcoming news for consumers, because how do you explain that fuel that you used to buy in January for just about 6 cedis, 45 pesos per litre, is now over 13 Ghana cedis per litre?
According to the National Petroleum Authority, several factors contribute to the reduction or increase in fuel prices, which is beyond their control. The authority says the two key factors that contribute to the drop or increase in fuel prices are the exchange rate and the world market price. The authority added that currently the world market prices had fallen, and that was an indication that the prices would drop at the pumps in August. The authority also explained that the differences in prices at the various fuel stations was down to the deregulation of prices and competition among fuel stations. The National Petroleum Authority said it will rather continue to monitor fuel stations to ensure that prices will be within the acceptable range.
It is not for NPA to determine when the prices come down. The prices are influenced by several factors. The two very key factors that keep the prices going up and down at any point in time are the world market price and the exchange rate. So as we speak right now, we've observed that the world market price have been falling. In fact, this window in which we are, we've seen that prices are falling. And it's because the world market price are falling. We are still observing the price on the world market, and we have seen that they will fall again in the next window, which is the first window of August. So as long as we've seen these drops on the world market, they are definitely going to reflect at the pump. So we should expect some price reductions in the next window because the world market price are also falling.
Speaking to Citi News after a media engagement in Cape Coast on issues of fuel adulteration, communications manager for the authority, Mohammed Abdul Kudus, indicated that strong sanctions will be meted out to fuel stations that will be caught engaging in such acts. Sanctions for such stations would include a possible shutdown of their facility.
When fuel is adulterated, a lot of the time the ordinary eye is not able to tell. But you put it in your machine and it starts to tell you a story, and you suspect that the fuel that you just bought probably has been adulterated. When you bring it to us as an authority, we immediately trigger our investigative processes to ascertain, first of all, whether your report or suspicion is correct. Once it is established prima facie, so in the initial stage of our investigation, we determine that the fuel was actually adulterated, we shut down the filling station immediately so that you don't sell adulterated product to consumers. Then the investigation would now continue to tell us whether it was deliberately done. And if it was deliberately done, for how long has it been? Then the committee that normally is established to determine punishment would then determine what sanctions should be brought to you. Okay. You could lose your license, it could be a monetary fine, or it could be both. And then when the determination is made, they will come after you. Largely, a lot of the stations in Ghana are playing to the rules and are supplying standard products.
Well, this is all time will allow us for this week's episode of the Business Weekly Show here on Citi TV, your most watched business show in the country. For more business stories, check out our website, citybusinessnews.com. My name is Michael Obodu. Thank you for tuning in. Let's connect on Twitter @mobodu. Catch you same time next week. Stay safe, stay informed. Bye-bye.